Baklava, baklava, baklava. There. I've said it 3 times. The curse should be lifted. I'm going to be reviewing the new album by Action Bronson, Johann, Sebastian, Bachlava, the Doctor. And obviously with a title like that, I have a lot to say. Both about Bach and about Bachlava and about Action Bronson. You know, it's really nice because he's on this little run here where the album covers are pretty similar for his last 3 projects. He manages to link them together. He does this really neat trick where the first song on this project sounds like the soundscape of the last one, that kind of breezy yacht rap, yacht rock style. And, you know, he's even able to link together one song to the next thematically, to where you just sort of are reminded of the last thing you heard as you hear the next thing. So sort of on a micro and macro scale, he's able to weave things or to layer things together like so many fine layers of dough in a baklava. Now, the thematics of this album is unfortunately not entirely about Johann Sebastian Bach, or is it entirely about baklava. It is a lot about food. It's a lot about wrestling, MMA, bodybuilding. Okay, I had to do a bit of research into all those areas. A little bit about nice cars. A little too casual with recreational cocaine usage. Just as a reminder, there's no ethical way to consume cocaine. It just sows death and destruction everywhere it goes. If you buy or sell cocaine, you are contributing to the death of hundreds, if not thousands, of people. And also, not to mention the entire criminal justice system. So, you know, if you're going to boycott anything super evil, cocaine itself is not evil. But the trafficking of it, it's just left a lot of human misery. But whatever, that's neither here nor there. Let's get to the title of the album and the whole idea, because it's a beautiful mixture of 2 great cultural things. Now listen, I love Bach, okay? You see, I have the Brandenburg Concerto, okay? If you don't know this, or concerti, because there's 6 of them. He made this whole series of little concert pieces for some rich guy named Brandenburg. The dude didn't even pay for them. He just made them on spec. Hey, would you hire me? And he didn't. It's absolutely beautiful. You ever hear the song Oh My God, They're Beautiful off of Handsome Boy Modeling School? That comes from this album. But, Bach is just amazing. His choral pieces, his pieces for organs, everything. The Goldberg variations there. I'm going to give you a piece of advice. If you can. Classical music is very daunting. And, of course, Bach isn't even classical music. He's Baroque music, but in common parlance, we'll say classical music. It can be really overwhelming. There's no words, you can't quite figure it out. So I'm going to give you a starting point to understand the genius, the mathematical and spiritual genius of Bach. I'm going to include a link in the description, and hell, I'll include a link right up there above the Eagles, okay? The Little Fugue in G minor, one of his most famous pieces. But someone on YouTube did a thing of where they actually made it clear in a visualizer, each note that's being played. And the way that a fugue works is you have something called the subject. It's like a melody. So that is played. Okay? That's played in one place. And then it's played in a different place on the organ. And it layers over itself. Again, not to be a prick. Not to be pretentious, but kind of like baklava, because you need baklava. We'll get to that very soon. It's all these different layers layering on top of each other. And when you watch this little video of this little tiny piece by Bach, you can see he's a scientist. He's picking out exactly the right notes, exactly the right time, but also the transcendent beauty of this melody, the complexity. When I hear Bach, I hear something very spiritual, not just because he wrote for the church, everyone did back then, but that he's able to get this quality of music that is simultaneously so edifying for your brain and so edifying for your heart and your soul and your spirit. Which means there's a couple other things you need to satisfy. You also need to satisfy your taste buds. You need to satisfy your nose. So that's why I think this title, Johann Sebastian Baklava, is so funny. Because we have this desire to represent some kind of highfalutin, high culture of Bach, right? Who's really the master of counterpoint, which I'll get to in a second. But the basic idea of counterpoint is having 2 different melodies playing at the same time. It's wild. It's actually very hard to do, and he does it better than anyone's ever done it. And he basically wrote the rule book and made it as well as it could be. So you have that sort of high culture, and then you have Baklava. which, you know, if you're an American like me, it might be seen as something kind of exotic, but it is not exotic, okay? It's as exotic as a Twinkie, all right? Whoa. I'm not saying it's as good as a Twinkie. It's much better than a Twinkie. But what I mean is, for many cultures, it is just a basic unit of dessert. It is just a thing that one expects to have. It is a thing that one has every week. Maybe not every week, but every time you have desserts, you're likely to have baklava for most of the world that was once occupied by the Ottoman Empire. So at the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to eat baklava, because I've been eating it wrong my entire life. I'm going to show you this special technique. All right. Now listen, baklava is very important as a food. It connects obviously with Action Bronson, with his upbringing, with his family. He is of Albanian origins, apparently through Kosovo. And if you watch his F That's Delicious video, I'll include a link to that as well. You can see him actually making baklava with his aunt and his cousin. And it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And I've been just looking up the history. It's a fascinating history. It goes all the way back to the 8th century BC by the Syrians. But really it was the Ottomans and the Turks, you know, from starting like in the 1300s, I think. There's a lot of records of making this. And what makes it interesting is it's all this dough, this very fine dough layer on top of itself. And then in the middle, you're supposed to have pistachios. And what's funny is, I'm going to say that. And if you watched Action Bronson's video, you're going to say that's not true. And if you're Action Bronson, you might say that's not true. If you're my wife, you know, who's originally from Yugoslavia, the Serbian part of Yugoslavia, she will say that's not true. Because in reality, in much of the former... So basically the Ottomans was the name of the empire that was run by the Turks, and they expanded out over a lot of the Balkans, over a lot of Europe, and they brought their culture, thankfully, to not just domination, but also culture. So they brought baklava to those places. But pistachios are all over Turkey. They're not in the Balkans. So you replace it with walnuts. Okay, so you'll know that you're eating a baklava from the Balkans if it's not pistachios, if it's with walnuts. I couldn't find one with walnuts, so I actually had to get one from a Turkish place. So that's what I'm going to be eating later. And then the other question about baklava, because you're here, because you're curious, no, it's not supposed to have honey. Okay, there's a whole thing where sometimes American snobs will be like, does this baklava have real honey? It's not supposed to. It's supposed to be basically what we call simple syrup, like sugar and water, maybe a little bit of lemon. That's what's supposed to be in baklava. Now the Greeks, they took baklava, they sort of took it over and said that it was their invention. It wasn't, and when they make it, sometimes they use honey. It is acceptable to have honey in baklava, but that's not the original thing. My final word about baklava is I had a friend I worked with. His name was Ryan Kelly. We worked a Blockbuster video together. More about that in a second. And he loved Jean-Claude Van Damme. More about him in a second as well. And there's a movie called Double Impact where Jean-Claude Van Damme plays twins. There's two of them! And in that, there's a scene that he would always quote where he can't make out what Jean-Claude Van Damme says, and he just looks at the camera and says, "Baklava for me?" And we've never figured out what he was actually saying. So now we have the sort of grand ambitions of this album. It's going to have the contrapuntal, scientifically precise lyrics and music production of Bach, along with the down and dirty, sweet, soulful, you know, like we're talking Balkan soulful, we're talking, you know, Albanian soulful, that kind of immigrant experience and European experience and all that, all mixed in together into one product, layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, with walnuts, not pistachios, in the middle, and sugar water, not honey, over the top. Let's give you an example song here with the song Salvaje. I'll include a link to that up there, once again above the Albanian flag. You might be asking, why do I have an Albanian flag? The better question is, why don't you? That's a very cool flag, you know what I'm saying? The sample here is cool because it's a very Baroque sample. Now, it's not Bach, okay? It's very hard to sample Bach well, okay? It takes someone like Prince Paul and Dan the Automator on the Handsome Boy Modeling School. Oh my God, they're gorgeous. It takes someone of that skill to actually sample Bach and make it work, because it isn't made for drums, you know what I'm saying? Like sort of pre-drums in a lot of ways. So this is actually a sample from someone named Juan Pablo Torres from Medellin, Colombia. And listen, I was going to do a video about the winner of the Copa America, and it was either going to be Colombia or it was going to be Argentina. And then the Argentinian team on the bus said a bunch of racist stuff about the French team, and that goes against the spirit of this channel, so I'm not going to be doing that. This is as close as we're going to go. I listened to the original kind of jazzy instrumental song by Juan Pablo Torres. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's this great like little guitar notes at the end. It is just an awesome sample, and it's made by Mr. Baklava himself. It's made by Action Bronson. Most of the beats on this are made by Derringer, of Griselda fame, but some tracks made by Alchemist, some by him, some by Derringer. And it has just the essential Action Bronson verse. Dr. Baklava, the mad technician, back in the kitchen, Magnum edition. I never touched the catfish. I'm nasty in badminton. So, like never eating catfish because, catfish are bottom feeders. Catfish is good though. That's delicious. I've had some great catfish. But still, that's like the idea of his sophistication, saying he's nasty at badminton. I challenge Action Bronson to a badminton game. Okay? I challenge you. I could beat you. I'm sure. I'm sure of it. Okay? I'm going to make this happen. I was trained by Mr. Arangio. Okay? Mr. Arangio was my high school gym teacher. And he was a complete psycho. Complete psycho. Not like my middle school gym teacher who was arrested for touching kids. That's the bad kind of psycho. Mr. Ranger was a good kind of psycho, and he trained me how to play badminton. But anyways, that's for another day. Once bitten, twice shot. My life aligns with lines in the sky. High and green Jaguars drive. Wouldn't take the money, so I gave him a gold watch, some fresh baked focaccia, and a nice plate of meats and cheese and olives. Just his whole thing is just filled with all this great food, And it sounds silly, but listen, I personally can relate to luxury and food because whenever I have money, I don't buy fancy cars, I don't buy fancy watches, I don't buy Dolce & Gabbana hats, but you're damn straight, I might buy some good food. I might buy some good ingredients so that my wife can make some good food. I might buy a nice plate of cheese and olives. I might go down and get an A+ down at the Wegmans. A+, that's like $20 a wheel, but it's worth it. This is the kind of luxury I can get behind. Out of nowhere, I hit the Fiend with a rock bottom, Shakvat Rachmaninoff. So that's some kind of MMA fighter. All these wrestling moves. So much wrestling and food. You get the sense this dude just eats well and watches wrestling. Man, I don't eat no mother effing McDonald's. Interesting, like taking a shot at McDonald's, which it's all very logical. And it's not like a snobby thing, like I'm too good for McDonald's. It's more the way that, honestly, if you know people from immigrant cultures, America is a wonderful place. In my opinion, it is the greatest country in the history of civilization, okay? Doesn't mean it's perfect, but I love America. But we don't have a real food culture. We don't have a food culture that's been developed over centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries. That's why our nutrition is so messed up. That's why we prioritize speed and consistency over quality. So when you have someone like Action Bronson who comes from, and listen, I'm married to someone from the Balkans. That's the people you want. I've had better food in Bosnia than I had in France, okay? That's the kind of, and I'm a French professor. That's a lot for me to say, okay? But it's the food culture that matters. So I think that's what he's saying here. Yeah, he's saying it's bad food and whatever, and the same kind of thing that, whatever, your annoying friend Becky in college would say. I don't eat McDonald's. Like, it's sort of like that, but it's actually not. It's actually more tied into a long-standing heritage of food culture, which is what we sorely lack in America. I eat the same thing as a rhino. Just, his funny words here. More like wrestling references. I actually got one. Hit him with a guitar like Honky Tonk did to Jake Snake. I think I remember that. I watched wrestling for like 2 years. Back in the days with Honky Tonk and Coco Beware and, those days. I don't know. So I was able to get that. He does rhyme old turkey with cold turkey, and he can pull it off. So I'm going to go through the rest of the album a little bit quicker here. Have myself a sip of water. I forgot to introduce myself again. Allow myself to introduce myself. My name is Professor Skye's Record Review. Thank you for auditing the Always Positive New Music Record Review Show. I just said the same thing twice. You can smash the like bucket. I like that. You can subscribe. I like that even more. You can say AVAA. That stands for awesome video as always, and I will always heart that. All right, let's get back into it. So it opens up with the song Splash, parentheses, provocative. And this is cool because it's like we're back in the last album. We're back in Crocodile Turbo, where it's that kind of yacht rock thing, the commercial for the cologne. He says, I feel like Baldur and Coneheads. And listen, I talk all the time about how I watch movies while I listen to music for the first time. A couple months ago, I rewatched the movie Coneheads, the stupid movie with Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin. It's actually a great movie. That movie does a better job of explaining the immigrant experience than any other American movie I've seen, except for, I don't know, Once Upon a Time in America, whatever, right? Godfather. Okay, there's other movies that are super good at describing the immigrant experience. But Coneheads, sneakily, kind of a stupid movie, but the way it depicts an immigrant arriving, the challenges they have, the way they move their way up, the way they follow the American dream, it's just great. Next track is called Sega, produced by Alchemist. So, in addition to loving Bach, I really like Bach-related reinterpretations. Matter of fact, anytime you hear, like over there, that's Glenn Gould's famous version of the Goldberg Variations. That's on a piano. Anytime you hear Bach on a piano, it's fake. He didn't have a piano. He played on an organ, and it was very different because the way that it works with an organ is that it's either on or off. You can't play gently. That's what made the piano such a revolutionary instrument. Is you could play it softly. The Italian word for softly is piano. Okay, that's why it mattered. You have an organ or harpsichord. Dang, dang. Okay, I'm gonna play it quietly. Dang. So, because of that, you can take a lot of Bach stuff and do interesting things with it, such as what Wendy Williams did, right? Wendy Carlos Williams did with her Switched on Bach and Switched on Bach 2, where it's all using Moog synthesizers, Moog synthesizers, Moog, and it actually is more faithful to the original because you can't modulate that sound either the same way you could on a harpsichord. But what this reminds me of the most, this little Alchemist produced song Sega here, is Jacques Lussier. Now this is some of the coolest damn music you are ever going to hear. Okay, it is a kooky Frenchman playing Bach music with a jazz style, and he is like a piano master. M-A-S-T-E. 10 R's at the end of that word. Okay, and he's transposing everything that Bach did into jazz, so that when you have, look at this, it's so hardcore. It's a Japanese import. No wonder it cost me $8. The Record Archive. The whole thing, like the counterpoint and the rhythm, it's beautiful. And this sounds like, I don't think it is, but it sounds like that kind of thing, like a jazzy reinterpretation of Bach, like counterpoint. Okay? That's what this feels like to me. This feels like this matches the concept of Johann Sebastian Bach. Jump in the taxi, gunned in the stomach, another whodunit. Just the way that he mixes to, like, just those sounds together. Axi, stomach. Whodunit, just these little sounds here. I'm that mother effer you not want rump with. Really beautiful play with syllables and sounds. Nourish a Thug is the next track. Take Your Temperature the Old Way. Listen, I have 3, almost 4 kids. The old thermometer in the butt is actually like a very efficient way of taking people's temperature. I know we like to laugh at it, but in some ways it's a lot better than the interlingual way. Nice kind of jazzy sample here as well. Less counterpointy, less Bach-y than the song Sega, which also points to the Sega song for making me think about the way every time I turn on Sega Genesis, who'd say, Sega. I've forgotten about that since back in the day when I'd play the best 2 games ever in the history of Sega Genesis. Number 1, Road Rash. Number 2, Toe Jam and Earl. You're welcome, video gamers. You find those games, you play those games, you'll be back to Funkatron in no time. Just beautiful atmosphere on the song. He has this line, I live it, I pull up to your crib with Exhibit and have him put a effing fish tank in the Civic. Just funny, he has fun with it. He has a lot of fun with words, he has a lot of fun with this imagery. He says in 96, hit the Blockbuster and the Blizzard. I used to work a Blockbuster video, okay? My employee number was 290027372229. All right? That 1995. I worked there. I still remember that number, okay? And it's Massachusetts. And when there was a snowstorm, even a small dusting of snow, you would think that we were living in Dawn of the Dead. It was like people banging down the doors, just like, I need Aaron Brockovich. I need Aaron Brockovich. Can you look on the shelf? Can you look on the shelf? Excuse me, are there any more copies of Aaron Brockovich? Excuse me, are there any more copies of Aaron Brockovich? Bring, bring. Thank you for calling Blockbuster Video, where you can pre-order Cinderella, 2 bags of popcorn and a Coke for $17.99. How may I help you? Do you have any copies of Aaron Brockovich? I swear to God, that's what it was like. Like the second the snow fell. So this is like the realest line I've ever seen a rapper ever rhyme to my experience. If you ever worked in a video store, people go nuts. They will just strip your store clean like a locust. All right. Talks about baked clams, more celebration here. And then he ends it with right around the city like Bad Lieutenant. He just makes these references that I mess with, Does your father know you have this car? If you've seen the movie, you go, Skye, you shouldn't quote that line. Skye, that's not cool. But most people haven't seen Abel Ferrara's Bad Lieutenant starring Harvey Keitel. Harvey Keitel had a run there where he was full frontal naked in like 8 movies in a row, only eclipsed by Ewan McGregor about 10 years later. Man, what's up with me and the movie references today? Next song is called Hideo Nomo. Cool kind of Mexican style horns, kind of triumphant here. Do a bad thing in a staircase. Malik Loba gave chase. Surgery looked extra Roman in the face. I should be in a toga. Bald eagles fly solo back in the day. Rock Hideo Nomo. Friday night baklava at the seaport. Praise Lord. Don't put your hand near the cheese board. Again, I understand this, man. You got to be careful on a cheese board. Cheese boards are serious. Don't just go thinking you're just going to grab the cheese, okay? Keep your hands away from the cheese board. There's a method to this. There's sequencing. There's proper cutting methods. I'm not joking. This is serious cultural stuff. Do not put your effing hands near the cheese board. Okay. No drums on this song. Later he says, Baklava Akabono, who's like a sumo wrestler. It's me, PlayStation 1, just one controller. I turn this ish into real life Tekken 3, make me feel like I'm 17. This image of having a PlayStation 1 with one controller is beautiful because it really implies the sort of working class, like not like lower class, but working class upbringing he's describing, where you have enough money to afford a PlayStation 1, but you don't have enough money to buy a second controller because they only come with one controller, It's a gorgeous and efficient little bit of storytelling all the way through, no matter how much he's talking about fancy food and cars and money and weightlifting and all that stuff. Like there's always this hint of this growing up in Queens as a Albanian immigrant experience. First, second generation. Then we get to Stam Salahe. Then we get to Hogan featuring Mayhem Lauren. Again, produced by Self. Real cool, kind of like Shaft style soundtrack, bass and fuzzy guitar. Lots of Coke references in here. Mel Gibson gave me COVID. He says that. Who knows if it's true? Maybe Mel Gibson gave Biden COVID. Who knows? Red Mustang door display the Cobra Snake. Cobra Snake. That means he has a Shelby. A Shelby Cobra Mustang. That's a car reference. I know a little bit about cars too. Not quite a full song, like it feels like it sort of zooms out, and then we have Mayhem Lauren's verse come in and it's killer. And again, it's these cool connections, because then we start with Citrus Wahoo, another killer beat, kind of a 70s future, like how the people in the 70s perceived of the future. Like a mixture of piano and synthesizers here. Mayhem, who started the end of the last song, starts this one. That's what I'm telling you. Like these songs tend to link together. Like there's references to like one 80s wrestler in Salvaje, and then the next song was Hogan. And there's a whole bunch of references to having Hulk Hogan's face, brother. Like it's like there's these little tiny connections between songs and between ideas. 2 hours into tripping, they found me in the kitchen carving chickens with great precision, I believe is what he says. And I like this because finally a rapper is talking about chickens, and he's probably talking about chickens, not about Coke. Next song is Compressor, featuring Larry June. This is maybe back more to the yacht style, the yacht rap style of the previous album. Larry June is on here, and he's perfect because he's like a total yacht rapper as well with his cool style here. Again, he connects these things so well because here he says, I'm catching alleys off the backboard for a sick old dunk, triple toe lutz. When I sing genuine songs, these B words go nuts. I'm so anxious. So he's quoting a often Timbaland produced R&B star of the 90s here. And then we get to the next song, NBA Leather on NBC, where he talks about learning how to do stuff from Missy, who's a different R&B star produced by Timbaland. Do you get it? Okay. So if you have a song called NBA Leather on NBC, and you are a red-blooded American male between the ages of 18 and 100, then you see the words NBA and NBC. Then you immediately think of the song written by, this is true, John Tesh for NBA on NBC. And what's funny, there's two funny things. This is not a sample of that. This is The Alchemist doing his goddamn best to make a song which is the closest look-alike, the most legalistically distinct song. They even add a harmonica to act like the little melody. And if you listen very carefully, the last two notes of this song are the exact same notes as the song. But other than that, I imagine they pass this through lawyers to make sure it's not the same thing. But you can still, and this is true because I've done it, you can sing the actual NBA on NBC song at the same time as you listen to this one. And if you've been cursed as I've been by the gift of second sight, if you've been cursed by having seen the Saturday Night Live sketch with Jason Sudeikis and Tim Robinson where they put lyrics to this song, go find it on YouTube. Ba 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 basketball, ba 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 basketball, ba ba. It's absolutely the funniest thing here. And, he has a whole verse here. He references Zidane, which is great. I'm a big soccer fan, as you know, especially my favorite player, Zidane, because he's from Marseille. Pass me the soccer ball like I'm Zizou, Baklava, bitch, Bizou. I'd cruise around Queens in a ski-doo, looking like RoboCop, the reboot, 97 X-Men shirt. The RoboCop reboot wasn't that bad. It wasn't. It wasn't good. It wasn't that bad. Alchemist verse is always strong here. Shadow Realm, the penultimate track here. High mandolin, breezy, cinematic. Very kind of gross sex lyrics. But then what's interesting is where does the sample come from? The sample comes from, and he plays the sample out towards the end of the song. It's from Al Martino, who's a great singer. Plays it out at the end, and you hear him say Al Martino's real name. Sensi, beautiful. That's a real man there. A man's man. Now, already this is sort of like, whatever, normative view of masculinity. We don't go to rap music for non-normative views of masculinity, okay? But what's funny is Al Martino was a great singer, a very important guy, But he's most famous for playing Johnny Fontaine from the aforementioned Godfather movie. And when you say Johnny Fontaine, if you've watched The Godfather as many times as I do, the opposite of what Action Bronson just said about him comes to mind. He just says, that's a man's man right there. When in reality, you have a whole scene where Don Corleone, played by Marlon Brando, is talking to Johnny Fontaine, played by Al Martino, and this is the dialogue. I'll start off as Johnny Fontaine. What can I do? What can I do? You can act like a man. What's the matter with you? Is this what you've become? A Hollywood F slur in Italian for people who prefer the company of men? Who cries like a woman? Oh, what do I do? Oh, what do I do? What is this nonsense? It's ridiculous. All right? Like literally, you can act like a man. One of the most famous scenes in all of The Godfather. Preceding the horse head, all that. So, anyways. It's funny, right? I imagine this. I mean, it's not like Action Bronson doesn't know The Godfather back to front. Maybe he doesn't. I'd be shocked, though. Based on the last song, he might be more into Goodfellas now that I think about it, because there's all these helicopters and all this coke going on. I haven't even mentioned all the coke references on this album. It makes me uncomfortable. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Album ends with the song Doctor. Gentle sample from a guitar. It's lilting and sweet, just this beautiful melody that ends and just is exactly how you want this album to end. It's sweet, and if you're listening to the album on on a loop, it leads perfectly into the next song. These are my Patreons. They help give me money to buy music. My wife loves Action Bronson. She really does. So I might buy Crocodile Turbo. I don't know. Instead of this, I can't tell. I have to figure out which one I like more. But they're all pretty similar. A couple of them want a shout out: Sammy Baudelaire, Lear, and John Coffey. Now I'll show you the real way to eat a baklava. Okay, so you see there's all the different layers. You have your dough. You have your, looks like there's walnuts in there too. And then you have the green of the pistachio. It turns out the proper Turkish way to eat it is upside down. So that all the sticky stuff that congealed on the bottom gets stuck to the roof of your mouth. So click off now if you do not want to see me try to talk with a mouthful of baklava. Hey, Basha. In Brighton, New York, okay? That's where I got this. Very good. It's not the best I've ever had. I had better baklava when I was in Sarajevo. Decent. The wife approves as well. Kurva. That's delicious. All right. Until next time, there's the camera. What? I said there's the camera.